I have two questions. The first question: has the Democratic Party committed suicide by biting the black hands that feed it? Here's the second question: has the African American community allowed itself to be taken for granted and thereby taken advantage of?
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon. I'm Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they happen in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which a lot of these events occur. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur. This enables you to better understand and analyze the events that impact the global village in which we live. Black Agenda Report has a piece entitled, "How the Democratic Party Committed Suicide by Biting the Black Hands That Feed It." On today's episode, the issues before us are, as I stated at the top, has the party, in fact, committed suicide? And has the African American community allowed itself to be taken for granted and thereby taken advantage of? For insight into this and for answers to these questions, let's turn to my guest. He's a former foreign correspondent for the Washington Post. He's the co-author of A Day Late and a Dollar Short: Dark Days and Bright Nights in Obama's Post-Racial America. His work can be found at Patreon as well as Black Republic Media. He's the author of this piece. He is Jon Jeter. Brother Jon Jeter, welcome back.
The pleasure is all mine, brother. Thank you for having me.
You open your piece as follows. The Democratic Party dug its own grave decades ago when it began trying to siphon voters from the Republican Party or the GOP by appealing to conservatives and ignoring the needs of its strong base of African American people. If political parties were prominent people, you'd have stumbled upon this obituary today. The Democratic Party, one half of America's long-standing ruling duopoly, and the author of political movements as disparate as Jim Crow and the New Deal, died Wednesday, July 24. It was 196. Sources said the cause was suicide following a long illness. Jon, that's incredibly, incredibly creative. I've gone through the coroner's report. I can't make heads nor tails when it comes to the cause of death. So what was the cause of death on July 24th?
It's sort of death by 1,000 cuts, but slitting your throat 1,000 times slowly over the years. Man, I really, that piece really meant something to me. I am, as I think you would say you are, a man of a certain age. And I remember very clearly Jesse Jackson's 1984 and 88 campaigns for president. I remember the energy and the excitement. I remember, even though I was just in my teens and early 20s, I remember that it was electric, right? Those campaigns. And then I remember Bill Clinton running for president. And I voted for Bill Clinton. But I remember holding my nose while I voted because I remember Bill Clinton lecturing Jesse Jackson about Sister Soldier, lecturing Black people, going to Black churches, lecturing Black people about how we have failed Martin Luther King. And I didn't quite understand it other than, I thought, well, Bill Clinton is, like most white people I know, racist, most, not all, but most. And I just wrote it off as that. When I was a young journalist at the Detroit Free Press, later I got to Washington the same time as Bill Clinton, January 1993, I got to the Washington Post. And it sort of dawned on me over the years, particularly as I heard Democratic presidents and Democratic candidates for president repeat these same tropes, scolding Black people. I remember, and I was in a very different place at this point, but I remember Barack Obama talking down to Black people in a way that just really offended me, scolding Black fathers for their failure to raise their kids. When a study at that time had been produced, which showed that Black men who are separated from their families are actually better parents, actually spend more quality time with their kids than any other ethnic group. And, Barack Obama telling a black church, I believe it was in South Carolina, that a good plan for economic development would be to stop throwing Popeye's chicken wrappers out of your car window, right? This kind of just the infantilization of the black voting black electorate. And it struck me that this is by design. They are talking to white people. And then this is only in the last few years where I read David Rodinger, the labor economist, labor historian, I'm sorry, who wrote about the Reagan Democrats in Michigan, who elected the blue collar white workers who elected Ronald Reagan president, who crossed over to elect Ronald Reagan president, and how his polling showed that their main motivation was race, or racism, I should say. They did not like black people. They defined black people as pulling down the party, and they defined Democrats as people who catered to blacks, who were lazy, welfare chiefs. All the tropes that were popularized by Ronald Reagan. And it struck me that the Democrats in '92, the astrophysicists, I believe they have they talk about solar systems that are so distant you can't see the sun, but you can tell by the movement of the planets that there is indeed a solar system, by the movement of the stars and the planets, that there is indeed a sun there, that it is indeed a solar system. No one really wrote it down, really, although the pollster, Stanley, I can't remember his name now, but the pollster, the Greenberg for the Democrats, he came close. But we can see by their actions that the Democrats in 1992 especially were wrestling with how to win the White House after they had been exiled by 12 years of Republican rule. And they chose between Jesse Jackson's campaign, which was trying to reunite that New Deal coalition, tenuous as it was, but it's still a New Deal coalition of black and white workers. And then Ronald Reagan's approach, which was to basically return to, the old Southern Democrats, George Wallace, basically, and refusing to be out inwarded, right? Keeping up this racist animosity and resentment.
I think that was Strom Thurmond who originally made that quote, "I will never be," right.
That's right. Yeah, George Wallace took it to another level, right? And I think that has been the Democrats' problem ever since. And it is, you would think a child could have told them this is not going to work well for you to antagonize purposefully your base, right? But this is the moment we're in where you see the Democrats, it's almost like a circus, a dog and pony show, where Democrats spend 4 years openly denouncing or renouncing their black base, and then in the election year trying to make up for it, trying to gin up the black vote, right? It's almost like this awkward dance that they're doing. And now we're seeing the culmination, because this has been going on pretty much for the last 30 years. I think Obama was the nadir or the zenith, depending on how you want to look at it. But I think that it's really run its course. I think it's possible that Kamala Harris can win this election, but even if that is the case, after 4 years in office, the Democrats are a spent force. They can't continue this dance.
So to those who would say, well, wait a minute, Jon, how can you say that the party is biting the hand that feeds it when you've had a president, Barack Obama, and from 2009 to 2017, and they are set, as we assume that when they come out of their convention in a couple of weeks, that Kamala Harris will be the nominee for 2024. So how do you answer those folks who say, well, they're not taking us for granted? Let's assume that she wins in November. They've had two African American presidents. We could talk about African, Jamaican, but we'll just put Kamala in the box. Over 20-year span.
And they've completely ignored, completely frustrated black demands, right? You think about Kamala Harris.
Well, Barack Obama told us we didn't make any demands. which is why we didn't get anything. That when he was asked that question, his answer was, "You didn't demand anything."
Yeah, and I would have to say he's actually got to give the devil his due. He was right on that. Hey, look, the 2008, what the Democrats did in pushing Barack Obama past Hillary Clinton was a stroke of genius. It really was. They had the perfect candidate to whip up, to generate this Black excitement in the Black community, which at that same time they were ripping off through these subprime mortgages, right, which were disproportionately aimed at Black homeowners. And what they did by pushing Obama to the fore, the Democrats I'm talking about, bringing Blacks, ginning up the Black vote, getting Blacks excited about someone who, at that point, Barack just didn't have much of a record for serving the Black community, but he went on in his 8 years in office to openly excoriate, scold, disappoint the Black community. And in fact, I think you could argue that in terms of Black people, I'm 59, I'll be 60 years old in January, and I would argue that Barack Obama has been the worst president in my lifetime for Blacks. And what I mean by that is the opportunity that he had in 2008 during the Great Recession, the opportunity that he had to actually begin to redistribute. And I'm not talking about socialism or communism. I'm talking about just redistributing wealth, just shaving off a portion of that onerous debt that many of us had accrued through these illegal, that's not my term, that's the FBI term, illegal loans, fraudulent loans that the lenders made. And he could have shaved off a portion of that debt, revived consumer buying power. As we speak, we're in the midst of the Wall Street has seen a week really of decline, and the reasons because Barack Obama set this in motion by not responding to the asset bubble in 2008. That asset bubble popped, right? Mm-hmm. Usually, how you deal with an asset bubble is you shave off a portion of the debt and you put people in jail, right, to disincentivize fraud, but you shave off a portion of the debt because that will revive buying power. Barack Obama didn't do that, right? He actually threw more money at the lenders. And so right now we don't have buying power. And who's leading that? African Americans. So I say all that to say, to answer your question, that the Blacks who have been candidates for high office, particularly for the White House, have been put there because they will participate, they will join in on this dance of scolding Black people for the benefit of the white vote, and then sort of doing this dance, this sort of vaudevillian kind of act where they every 4 years they talk about what they've done for the Black community, what they're going to do for the Black community, how much they love Black people, and it's just, I think it's run its course. I feel that it's run its course. And let me just end with this. And I really do believe that the legacy of Barack Obama, we've always had class tension within the Black community. Now I think we're going to see the eruption of a real civil war, a real class war within the Black community, where the Black elected officials are very much like conservatives and very much like white liberals. I think we're getting to a point now where we're going to see that the fault lines are very sharply drawn, and the Black elected officials, Black celebrities, Van Jones and Jay-Z and Bakari Sellers, that all these people are going to be seen as class enemies to the working class Black community and the people who are its allies.
A couple of things. One, you mentioned the asset bubble and former President Obama giving the money back to basically bailing out the banks and not bailing out the homeowners. And I remember, because to your point, that would have been the move. Don't give the money to the banks, deal with the loans. And that way you would have enabled people to stay in their homes. You would have been able to maintain the integrity of a number of neighborhoods, even down to the level of public schools and public school budgets, because they get their money from property taxes by maintaining the value of property. There were a whole lot of things, a whole lot of benefits that would have come from that action. Instead of giving the money to the banksters, give the money to the homeowners. And I remember a press conference where former President Obama was asked why he did it the way he did it. And his answer was, and I remember this very clearly. His answer was, I didn't expect the banks to do this. People were asking him, why hasn't the money that you've given to the banks been loaned out? Why hasn't that money been distributed to the communities in need? And he said, I didn't expect the banks to do that. I said, well, man, that's what banks do.
Right.
You know,
and maybe you shouldn't have run for president if you don't have that kind of understanding of finance.
Well, but that's the same guy that told the banksters, I'm the one standing between you and the people with the pitchforks.
Right. And I believe it was in that same interview, where he said that the reason he didn't bail out the homeowners who had been defrauded of their homes through these subprime mortgages, he said he didn't want to invite moral hazard. Well, moral hazard is exactly what he invited, but on behalf of the banks, not on behalf.
Oh, see, I thought he said Merrill Haggard, not moral hazard.
Right.
My bad. I thought he didn't like country and western music. I'm glad you straightened that out for me. And the other thing you mentioned about former President Obama, and what I assume we're going to see from Vice President Harris, is they have, I call it minstrel diplomacy. They are being used to sell imperialism and neoliberalism. And because it's coming from them, because Kamala Harris was selling us reinvading Haiti, along with Linda Thomas Greenfield and so many others, but because it was Black people selling it, then there must not be anything wrong with it. We must be able to go ahead and accept it because of who it is that's selling it to us. I want to read another paragraph from your piece wherein you write it's important, however, to view Biden as a vital organ to a larger body politic that finally flatlined after failing to address a chronic illness akin, say, to a diabetic eating Big Macs every day for the past 30 years. Biden does not, in fact, owe his failed re-election bid to senility, though his cognitive decline is apparent, but to his party's strategic decision 3 decades ago to compete with Ronald Reagan's GOP for racist white suburban voters by openly repudiating the Democrats' electoral base of African Americans. And that gets to what you just opened with. But I also think it's important for people to understand that that by taking us for granted and by allowing ourselves to be taken for granted, the Democrats know we're not going anywhere. And so that enables them to speak to a lot of issues while actually appealing to that white middle class male voter, because they don't want to appear to be a party that's too Black. They don't want to appear to be a party that's catering to Black people. Jon Jeter.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I think I ride with Black people. I rock with Black people. I will to the day I die, particularly the Black working class. My father was a UAW member, and as much as the unions are fraught with racism, I still claim the working class. That's the class I was born into and the class I will die in. Although if I hit the lottery, I guess I'll be a Cadillac communist at that point, maybe.
In fact, really quickly, really simply, the CIO we got the AFL-CIO because the AFL was racist. Yes. And okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then the CIO turned racist.
Right.
But that's another story. But no, this is really a choice that the Democrats made, which just shows how unimaginative they were if they had followed Jesse Jackson's model, pulling more and more people, which, by the way, was what RFK planned to do before he was assassinated, was to pull more and more people into the tent, younger people. It's very conceivable they would never have lost an election over the last 30 years, right? It's very conceivable. We have 100 million voters at least every year who are eligible to vote, who don't vote. Pulling those people in, more of those people in, by giving them something to vote for would be a winning strategy, a sustainable strategy the Democrats just relied on their own. They just reverted to form, right? Racist Democrats like Bill Clinton, like Ben Pitchfork Tillman. That's
man.
who they are. Yeah,
Right.
and they can't sort of snap out of that. And so now they're stuck. They're stuck with this dance. It's very awkward. A dance. Performative blackness. That's what Barack Obama is. That's what Kamala Harris. They perform, but they're not radical black political actors. Because if they were, and we have to take bear some of the responsibility for this failure. We black people who have historically been the most sophisticated voters in the United States. Since they ran Barack Obama, we have for some reason forgotten that we have agency in this, that if we just sit and wait 4 years to go cast a ballot for whoever they put up for us to vote, that we might well be buried under a ton of ash, like lost city of Pompeii or whatever, because our parents, our grandparents knew, much like they did in Chicago with Harold Washington, right? They faced the same dilemma. The Democrats just basically crapping on them, and then asking for their vote. And they decided in 1982 that, we'll just get our own candidate to run, right? And they got Harold Washington. They drove each other to the polls. They registered voters. They raised money, even though they didn't have much. They raised money, and they got him by the finish line, right? Now, it won't look the same way now, probably, but the point is that they used their imagination. They didn't just sit there and say, this is who we got to vote for. They did something about it. They demonstrated their own agency. We need to get back to that. But let me just say this, too, on that point. I do feel, though, that this is, in a way, a culmination of what Malcolm said when he said, I think there will be another civil war in this country, but it won't be black versus white. It'll be the haves versus the have-nots. Mm-hmm. And I believe we are getting closer to that. You see now these campus protests that emerged over the spring, which were led by the vanguard of which was Jewish people and Arab people and black people. I think that's going to be the coming revolution where we see what's happening in Gaza, rightfully so, has become the moral center of the universe. But that cause, Gaza, which of course does not speak well of Kamala Harris, that cause, I believe, is going to intersect. We already see it intersecting with other causes. Cop City in Atlanta, right? The Jim Crow justice system. We see it intersecting with these other causes. That's how revolutions are born. So I say all that to say that I think that the Democrats are going to be on the wrong side of history. I think this deal they struck, this Carthaginian peace deal that Black Democrats have struck with the party, I think that it has run its course, right? Mm-hmm. And that people no longer have any use for it. I don't know if Trump or Kamala Harris is going to be the next president, but I know that the American people are going to lose either way.
And I think evidence to what it is that you've just articulated in terms of this confluence of interests between Jewish Americans, between Arab Americans and African Americans, we're seeing now how Republicans are taking control at the electoral board level, the local electoral board level. They are now denying elections. They are now failing to certify elections. And this is something that people need to pay very, very close attention to because they are gaining control of the apparatus itself. And when they get control of the apparatus itself, then that's going to make our challenges even that much more difficult in terms of challenges, in terms of electoral politics, is going to make our challenges even harder to be successful at when you have members of election boards that fail to certify elections, not because they find wrongdoing in the process, but simply because the candidate that they back. Look, Donald Trump gave this speech. He was in Atlanta today. I think it was Sunday or Monday. And he's pointing to people in the crowd that are at his campaign rally who are members of the county boards of election. And he's applauding them and lauding them for how loyal they are to his efforts.
Oh, wow. I did not realize that. And that's very dangerous because these elections, these presidential elections, tend to be battles of attrition, right? Who can do more to turn the vote, which means that they're very slim margins. So I mean, if Donald Trump has a little bit of leverage with the elections board in Milwaukee, in Detroit, in Philadelphia, you might as well hand the presidency over to him now, right? So this is something else.
And that's why he is saying, Christians, after this election, you won't need to vote. He is saying to people, I've got this. I don't even need your vote. I've got this. And after this election, you won't need to vote.
Yeah,
and that goes back to, and I think this went over the heads of a lot of folks. His key advisor, the guy that's in jail now, went to jail.
Bannon. Uh-huh.
Steve Bannon said, our objective is the deconstruction of the administrative state. Steve Bannon was very, very clear about Trump's objective is to deconstruct the administrative state. And I don't think many people paid attention to that. And that is what we see with the January 6th attack on the Capitol, with their getting their talons into local boards of election, with this whole Project 2025, which isn't new. It's old wine in new bottles, but all of those things are culminating with a Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, it's really a historic time. We don't know how it's going to turn out, but I mean, if you look at the situation on the ground in Nazi Germany, say in 1934, it'd be very similar to what we're seeing now with this demagogue clearly rising up. And then you see all the other parties in Germany, although we only have one here in the United States, you see all the other parties sort of ceding that ground, right, to this demagogue and the people who support him. And that's what's shaping up here. And the Democrats, again, it could be an opportunity for the Democrats to actually say, okay, we're going to step in and we're going to restore democracy. But they don't really care about democracy. How do we know? The same people who are complaining about January 6th and the Trump supporters who wanted to overturn the election just announced that the winner of the election in Venezuela is the guy who came in second past the post, right?
Right.
And then the silliness. We believe that the election was stolen. The Carter Center, Jimmy Carter,
yes,
has called the elections in Venezuela the freest and fairest he has ever observed.
Correct.
The National Lawyers Guild went in there now and they said, "No, this election is fine, right?" But we're going to say that this guy who's a conservative in a country that is 13% black and probably half of them are of mixed race, we're going to say this white conservative went in there and overthrew and basically beat the Socialist Party, the Bolivarian Revolution that has been in power since 1998. And not just beat him, but beat him by 34 percentage points, I believe.
Now, I was calling this out months ago and folks, you need to really understand this. And there are numerous, if you go to Orinoco Tribune or you go to VenezuelanAnalysis.com, you'll find plenty of articles on this. So the United States started backing the Venezuelan conservative candidate, Marina Machado. Mm-hmm. And then she was convicted by the Venezuelan Supreme Court and found to have been basically an unregistered foreign agent. She was operating, I think, on behalf of Peru. I think it was Peru, against the interests of Venezuela. So they said, because you have been operating as this agent for another country against Venezuelan interests, you can't run in the election. So the United States started backing her, knowing she couldn't run. And then they found the Gonzalez, the guy that replaced her, but he's basically her mouthpiece. And I was saying all along, the United States is backing her, knowing she can't win, and then backing Gonzalez, knowing he can't win. so that when they lose, they will claim the election was fraud. And that's exact. Now, here's the problem. So the United States goes in to Venezuela and they try to foment civil unrest the same way that Victoria Nuland went in to Maidan Square and overthrew the democratically elected government in Ukraine, leading us to where we are now in Ukraine. The difference between, or one of the differences between Ukraine and Venezuela, or a couple differences. One, the people are armed. There is a armed popular militia that when the bell rings, or as George Clinton would say, when the horn blow, you better be ready to go. They come in the street packing. In fact, we know this when we had what we called the coup of the Bay of Piglets about a year and a half ago. Some American mercenaries tried to float their way into Venezuela.
That's right.
And they were stopped by a group of Venezuelan fishermen that arrested these guys, damn near killed them, but exposed them for trying to come into the country to overthrow the government. So you've got a very strong citizen, heavily armed citizen militia in Venezuela. And here's the other thing. It's not about Maduro.
No.
It's about the Bolivarian Revolution.
That's right. That's right.
These folks are Chavistas.
That's right.
Hugo Chavez was the man. So they see Maduro not as Maduro. They see Maduro as an agent of the revolution.
That's right.
I'll make one more statement about this, and because you know more about this than I do. I'm going to make this point. This is hyperbole, but I want to say they would say Nicolas Maduro be damned. It's about the revolution. Yeah. It's not about him as an individual. And so long as he stays true to the revolution, they will stay true to him. Yeah. When they see him deviate, he's done.
I mean, I could not agree with you more. And I've not stepped foot in Venezuela in 20 years, although I talk to people who are still on the ground there every once in a while. I'm gonna tell you something, man. I have never seen, and I've lived in South Africa. I've been through most of Africa, through half of South America. I've never seen, Frantz Fanon talked about the need for revolutions to create the new man, the new woman, right?
Right.
A different consciousness. I'm not sure I ever knew what that meant until I went to Venezuela. They really have a different consciousness. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I think a lot of that was Hugo Chavez. I mean, it really does come down to the man. He was as brilliant. I've met Mandela, who I think highly of. I met Mugabe. I've never met a man who's more charismatic, more powerful, more visionary.
Okay.
Than Hugo Chavez. Robert Mugabe, I met later in life. I don't know what he was like earlier. Same with Mandela. But Chavez was visionary. And I said that to say that so much of this revolution is his doing, his understanding. When the United States organized a coup in 2002, the people, they weren't as well armed. They didn't have the militias then, although some of them had armed. The people, because the government, the news media, which is controlled by the wealthy, the oligarchs in Venezuela, they told the people that Hugo Chavez is on the beach in Cuba kicking it with Fidel Castro. The people had these ham radios. They got on the ham radio and said, "Nah, that ain't what happened. He would never abandon us like that. I think he's a mirror for us. Let's go get him." And they went mostly with pots and pans. And you can look at there's a documentary. I can't remember the name of the documentary. Right. It's black women who were in the front, pots and pans. And look, you got to give him back, right? And they did, right? And so
it took a couple days.
It took a little while, right?
About 2 days,
right? Because like I said, they mostly just had pots and pans, but right. They got him back. Now, look, I think that the vote, which was the closest it's been, I think in 26 years now, the vote just a little bit beyond 50% for Maduro.
I think it was 53. I want to say it was like 53-46 or something like that.
Yeah, I saw 51 to 44, but something like that. But anyway, it's a diminished margin. I mean, they have had inflation. These sanctions have taken an effect, and right. I know the people I talked to on the ground. I lived in Ecuador for a year or so, a few years ago, and you saw more and more people coming to Ecuador who were disillusioned with the Bolivarian
Right.
revolution. And these are people who would have been supportive, people who were of
Right.
color, mestizos, no blacks, but mestizos anyway. So I do think that it's lost a little bit of its luster. But this is what I know, right? They did not put up a right-wing candidate who was talking about taking Venezuela back to what it was in 1989 before what they called the Caracazal, when the president basically told the Venezuelans one day, we're not going to convert to neoliberalism and ratchet up the bus prices and all that. And the next day they went to work and the bus prices had doubled, right? And so there was this riot, and that's what produced Hugo Chavez, right? So what I'm saying is that there's a sophistication of the Venezuelan voter, the average Venezuelan. I wish we had it here in the United States because they understand, as Fred, I know you're going to get sick of me quoting Fred Hampton, right?
I'll never get sick of you quoting Fred Hampton.
But it's like the Venezuelans understand. I wish we understood it. I wish you peace if you willing to fight for it. The Venezuelans, they live by that, right? And so, I don't know. I can't tell you. The United States is very powerful, even though we're a diminished force. I can't tell you they'll always be able to hold off the United States, but they're going to have to fight them for Venezuela.
So we started this with your piece, how the Democratic Party committed suicide by biting the hands that feed it. And the way that we got to this discussion about Venezuela was a discussion about democracy and how Joe Biden tells us democracy is on the ballot, and Kamala Harris, the democracy is on the ballot, and Donald Trump, democracy, we got to protect democracy, while we're going around the world overthrowing democracies. That's why we're fighting in Venezuela, in Ukraine, because the United States overthrew the democratically elected government. We're trying to have regime change in Russia, while the Russians, you can talk about their form of government all you want to. It is democratic by their definition, and he was democratically elected. We can talk about Syria. We can talk about what they're trying to do in China as it relates to Taiwan. We can talk about what's going on in Gaza. We keep talking about we're defending democracy in Israel. Democracy for who?
Right.
Democracy. There are even Jews in Israel that aren't a part of the democratic process. So that's how okay. I just wanted to kind of bring us all back to this. Vice President Kamala Harris, and I still use the word presumptive because even though she got the vote she needed through the Zoom process, they're going to have a convention, which I will attend as a journalist, not carrying anybody's banner.
You sure you don't have that vote blue no matter who banner at home you're going to take with?
No. So okay. So now she has announced her running mate, and Tim Walz has debuted as her VP pick in Philly. And my question to you relative to this is the story that Harris selected Walz to be her running mate, or is the story that she did not select Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro as the team gets ready to kick off its 5-state tour? Which of those, and they both could be the story, but because we kept hearing that she was going to, a lot of people thought Shapiro was going to be the pick, and the fact that they were kicking off in Philly and now they're not, awkward. But which one is the story?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to say, if I had to bet money, if I had to bet the farm, I would say that the Democrats are going to lose this election. But I do think Walz is probably the best choice that she could have made. Shapiro would have been catastrophic, I think, just because, whether they want to admit it or not, Zionism is on the ballot, right? We know Kamala has said she's a Zionist, right? We know she's had meetings with AIPAC in which she has asked for it not to be recorded. She is a Zionist. She supports Israel's right to defend itself when it has no such right, no more so than the Nazis did in Germany anyway. So Waltz, I think, really.
Oh, wait a minute. I need to say, so folks can clearly understand that you're stating that Israel does not have the right to defend itself. That statement is based upon international law.
Yes.
You're not making this up.
Right.
Kamala Harris coming out and saying Israel has the right to defend itself. As a prosecutor, she should know better, because that's wrong.
Yes.
It is just, you might as well say the world is flat and the sun revolves around the earth.
Right.
The world is not flat.
Yeah.
Even though when you stand out on the horizon, it looks that way.
Right.
It ain't necessarily so.
Yeah.
And the sun does not revolve around the earth.
And the rest of the world knows this, right? The Palestinians are an occupied people. You have the right to
That's
resist.
why they're called the occupied territory.
That's exactly right. International law. It's not. Yeah.
Okay,
International law.
But I just want to be very, very clear on that point.
Yeah, I just think it's so interesting, though. I mean, it seems to me that their choice of Waltz is. Am I pronouncing his name right? Waltz.
Waltz. No, there's no T. WALZ. Waltz.
Okay, Waltz. Okay. I think it's a concession to the anti-Zionist protests that I still think are going to be a very big factor in this convention. Chicago is home to the largest Palestinian population in the country. And Lord knows how many Black people are going to come out and support, because they're protesting their mayor there, who, did a mini. He's an Obama mini-me. Ran left and is governing right. So it does seem like it's like the best choice. Like, it gives them a shot because he softens their edges, Kamala's edges, the Biden Harris administration's edges in terms of Zionism. But it softens his edges. It doesn't eliminate them. From what I understand, he still supports Israel, right? And I don't know. Look, one thing we have to be honest about now is that the media is very much complicit in this game that the Democrats are running, and that's what it is. The media is very complicit in this, and so are they going to really ask the Harris ticket, Kamala Harris's ticket, the tough questions? I don't know, but you'd have to assume that somewhere between now and November that they're going to be confronted in a very public fashion with this question of, well, what are you going to do about Israel? And that's why I see them losing this race, if nothing else. And I know that foreign policy does not often decide a presidential election, right? But I think given the state of this, the first live stream genocide in history, right, which daily is bringing these unbearable images into our homes, that combined with their failure to do anything for their black base, especially Black men, I have a hard time seeing a path to victory for the Democratic Party.
Well, staying in that region, another thing that folks, you got to stay tuned, because these dynamics are changing minute by minute. Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, came out and said, look, we are going to respond. Well, let me take a step back. Secretary of State was telling us Monday, 24 hours, and we expect that Iran is going to respond with, man,
like he knows.
So Hassan Nasrallah comes out and says, well, we're going to respond, and now we don't care what the outcome is. He said he came out Monday and in a very clear speech and said, we are going to respond. We're going in hard, and we don't care what you do. You have Ansar Allah in Yemen saying, please send missiles our way, because every missile you send towards us is a missile you can't send into Palestine. Now, this is the poorest country in the world. The poorest country in the world. They have shut down. I'm talking about Yemen. They have shut down the Red Sea. You can't get nothing in or out of the Red Sea. There's a port in Israel called Eilat. The port of Eilat has gone bankrupt because Ansar Allah has been sending missiles into the port of Eilat, like 1,400 miles away.
Wow.
And they're saying, we welcome the fight. Look, that's some smoke you don't want.
Right.
Because, you know, if we were in South Central LA, this would be the Bloods and the Crips saying, I'm about that life.
Right. The Houthis and Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, you know they're about that life because they handed a behind whooping to Israel in 2006, which Israel's never forgotten, right?
No.
And the Houthis, I mean, man, I mean, you talk about solidarity. I mean, they're what anybody who says they're a revolutionary, aspires to be a revolutionary, needs to look at. They need to have a picture. We need to take the picture. Well, no, maybe don't take the picture of Martin Luther King down. Maybe put the Houthis right next to it in every person's kitchen.
And see, they're not new to this game.
No.
When Ansar Allah, I believe, means a helper of God.
Know that.
And I believe that comes from the time of the prophet, may peace be upon him. They trace their lineage that far back. When he came through that region, they were assisting him.
Oh, I did not know that.
So when that's your psyche, when that's your North Star, look, when Mike Tyson tells you to stop kicking the back of his seat on an airplane, you might want to stop kicking his back of his seat on an airplane.
You might consider doing what he says.
I don't know if you remember that story.
Yeah, I do. I do.
When they had to carry that guy off of the plane,
and he got off lucky
because he survived the assault.
Yeah.
And I don't mean assault in a legal term, ass whooping. So anyway, all of this. I bring this up again, folks. I'm trying to connect these dots. As we get into September and October, Vice President Harris may be asking questions about the regional war that is ongoing, because that's where we're headed. That's what Israel wants. They are trying to bait the United States into a conflict in the region.
Yeah.
And now you've got the supreme leader in Iran, Khomeini, saying to Hezbollah, "Go ahead on, do what you got to do." Yeah. He's not saying pump your brakes, partner. He's saying do what you got to do, and he's saying do what you got to do because we're about to do. We got to do.
We about to put in that work too. And I don't mean to be glib about it, man. This is a horrible thing that's happening. Yes. But you got to look at it. Americans really need to look at it in context.
Wait a minute. Don't send your money yet, because there's a bamboo steamer that comes with this deal. Turkey.
Right.
Erdogan is saying, we in it too.
Yeah.
He says if we have to go in now. He can be a funny dude.
Yeah.
But he is at least saying, "Oh, if we got to go in, we're going in."
Yeah. This is a perfect storm. I mean, this is the worst perfect storm I've ever seen in my lifetime. You've got this on the one side. You've got, and you really think about it, this revolutionary consciousness that has been strengthened. Right, and amplified by Israel's decision to commit genocide in front of cameras. And then when we say, "Yo, man, that's a genocide," they say, "What's your point?" Right? Like this is the end of
Your problem
Israel. Exactly. As we know it, Israel will never go back to what it was on October 6th of last year. It just won't. Right? It's not going to happen. And the United States, I don't think it's going to go back to what it was on October 6th of last year either. What it's going to be, I don't know, but we're really seeing the end of it, and you can see it in a couple of things. One is the congealing of this resistance movement in the Middle East against the white settler colonialism of Israel and the United States and the West, right? You see it with the BRICS, whose GDP cumulatively has surpassed the United States. Russia, I believe, has said, at least it's reported, they're arming the Houthis, right? They're arming the Houthis. I've read that, but I don't know if it's true or not, right? And then you've got the Peace Day resistance, a recession. Oh, I didn't even think about that, right? You've got in the Sahel region in Africa, right. You've got this resistance is forming, and you've got all of Africa starting to sort of assert itself and say, wait a minute, why do we need these people who speak French and who speak English in here telling us what to do? They claim to be the boss. Why do they take our resources out, pay us nothing, take our resources out? You've got that congealing, and then you've got the Peace Day resistance. You've got that also in South America, although it's in bits and starts. The pink tide is kind of a ebb and a flow. But then you've got the Peace Day resistance, which is what some economists and financial people believe is at the very least a very grave and very deep recession. And some people are saying could be the greatest depression that the world has ever seen. And there are numbers. I mean, the United States has never been $35 trillion in debt. I mean,
against a $25 trillion GDP.
I mean, come on, man. So we've got a lot of issues. I'll say that.
Try to get a mortgage with that bank balance.
Man, I was looking at the loans for, and then we've got credit card debt up the kazoo, and the average interest rate, I believe, is 25% on these credit card rates. And we're dealing with all these. No, that's the problem. We're not dealing with these problems because we don't face these problems.
So, all of that, I wrote a piece. You're with her, but is she with you?
Yeah.
And the piece is, contrary to what many people want to say, it's not anti-Kamala, it's pro-us.
Yes.
The question in the piece is, what are you as an African-American community demanding from her? And we have just articulated a number of very important issues that are and will impact how much you pay for a pack of chicken wings, a gallon of milk, and a loaf of bread.
Question.
So it's great that she's an AKA. It's great that she went to Howard. It's great that she can do what she do. But what does she stand for? What, if you go to her website right now, zero policy. Zero. Not nary policy reference.
But she has Megan Thee Stallion twerking for her.
Oh, well, then that gets my vote.
I'm just saying.
Hey, I ain't mad at it.
You know what Earl Butz said about black voters, right?
Go ahead.
I don't know if I can repeat it here, but all we want is a warm toilet seat, tight. You know what? What was it? And a loose fitting pair of shoes. Apparently, Emma thinks the same.
So here's the question. Politics, we are so caught up in the politics of personality and the politics of phenotype. We are trying to defend, Donald Trump said she isn't black. Who cares? When a pack of chicken wings is $21 a pack, when a gallon of organic milk is $12 a gallon. That matters to me because I drink organic milk. Why are we so caught up in that when your tax dollars are funding genocide? When your tax dollars are paying the salaries and the retirement of Ukrainians, and you don't have a retirement plan. Your pension plan went out the window 25 years ago.
That's right.
We're paying Ukrainian pensions.
And healthcare. And healthcare.
And education. Budgets are numeric representations of priority.
That's right. A moral document, as King said. That's right.
And we keep being told we don't have the money. We don't have the money, but F-16s just landed in Ukraine, which I'll say in the next 10 days will probably be blown into rubble. But we're sending F-16s. So Lockheed Martin is happy. Jon Jeter. I mean, am I hating black women because I'm questioning policy issues related? Oh, we have to give her a chance. What did Barack Obama say when members of the black press said you didn't really do anything for the black community? He said you did not demand anything.
Yeah.
Frederick Douglass says power yields nothing without demand. It never has, and it never will.
That's right.
But when I ask the question, well, what are you demanding? Oh, no, Wilmer, see, you have to give her a chance. Oh, here's the other. I'll make this point, and then I'm going to turn over to you. So you've got folks like Simone Sanders that say, well, she's been vice president for 4 years. Kamala has earned it. And then you say, but wait a minute. So while she was vice president, what'd she do? Oh, well, you have to understand that vice presidents, their job description is really very vague, and you can't really expect it. Well, no, see, you can't have it both ways.
Right.
You can't tell me she earned it by being vice president. And then when I ask you, well, what did she do? You can't tell me, well, she didn't do anything, because vice presidents don't do anything. Jon Jeter.
Yeah. I just, we really need to raise our level of play. All Americans do, but particularly African Americans, because we have historically been the vanguard of this revolution, of the revolution in the United States, a progressive working class revolution. We need to raise our level of play. We need to deepen our understanding of politics. We need to do exactly as you say. We need to develop a list of demands, make them, and stick to them. I'll try to say this very succinctly. I'm coming out with a new book in September next month, Class War in America, How the Elites Divide the Nation by asking, are you a worker or are you white? I began the book talking about a political movement in the 1870s in the Reconstruction period in Virginia, where blacks were the majority of a political party called the Readjusters, poor whites, mostly farmers, and blacks in Virginia, who decided to team up and to the elites of both parties, Republicans and Democrats, were trying to take their tax money and pay the bonds, the money that was loaned to Virginia by the wealthy, the aristocrats, the Confederates, the people who really were responsible for the war, the Civil War. And they said they wanted to pay like exorbitant interest rate, 6%, which would be actually pretty low these days. And this coalition said, no, we won't do it. And so this group, the Readjusters, they lowered interest rates.
They readjusted the loans.
They spent this money on schools and things like that. They started feeling themselves, and the white party leaders said, well, the blacks were saying, well, we want to enter the whipping post. We want this and we want that, And the whites in that party, the Readjusters, didn't hear them. They didn't feel them, right? So they didn't do it. So the brothers said, oh, because, it's just black men who voted at that time, although we know that their black women supported them in this. The black men said, okay, cool. So the next election, right, the Readjusters lost everything. And they realized, to their credit, they said, oh, they were serious. and so when they returned to power, they did everything the brothers said. They eliminated the whipping post. There was in the book, there's a point where they talk about the patronage jobs they handed out to blacks, because black were 60% of this party. There's a postmaster who said I think it was 1881, he said, my office is so full of blacks, or they might have said colors at that time. My office is so full of colors, it looks like Africa in here, right? This is 1881. So I said that's to say.
In Virginia,
the heart of the Confederacy, right? 1881. People have read this and they said I was lying. I did not make it up. It is a true fact, as we say, right? We need to return to that mindset, that understanding. We need, like the people in Venezuela, like the Houthis, like the Lebanese, like the Hezbollah in Lebanon, we need to return to that level of understanding and raise our revolutionary metabolism. Look, man, as Fred Hampton said, last time I'll quote Fred Hampton today, if you say you want to do something revolutionary, but you say I'm too young to die, you don't realize you were already dead. It's a lot of dead men walking in this country right now.
Jon Jeter, my brother, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure, man. Always a pleasure.
Folks, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. Also, please follow and subscribe. Go to that Patreon account. Help us out, please. This isn't cheap. We need you to make this work. Leave a review and share the show. Follow us on social media. You can find all the links below in the show description. And remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. I'm going to see you again next time. Until then, I'm Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a great one. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.